Sand hissed against Noah Cade's goggles like static. The wind howled across the endless desert, swallowing the sound of his voice before it left his throat. He spoke anyway, narrating numbers, notes, diagnostics, because silence was worse. Pipe junction 77, stress nominal, corrosion moderate, recommend replacement. The words had no one to land on but the dry air and the shifting dunes. Noah knew that. He'd been talking to himself for 3 hours now. It was easier than listening to the memories. His transmitter had died mid-word. One moment he was reporting to the surface team. The next he was alone. A single human shape wrapped in protective cloth and stubbornness, trudging through the heat-warped wastes of Rethra IV. He tapped the side of the device anyway. "Come on," he muttered. "Just one more update." Nothing, dead silence. It wasn't the first time things had gone wrong for him on a job. But usually they didn't go wrong this far from help. The old colonial water pipelines he was inspecting stretched for kilometers beneath the desert, rusting arteries built by hands long gone, still carrying life to settlements that had forgotten who built them. And now one of them was leaking. That was his job: find the failure, log the data, and get out. Simple. Only nothing about it felt simple. The sand beneath his boots shifted again, a subtle movement at first, like a sigh. Noah stopped walking. He scanned the horizon, dunes, rocks, a thin smear of heat haze, nothing unusual. And yet, the ground lurched. No. It gave way beneath him like a trapdoor. The world went vertical. His safety line snapped taut, cutting into his ribs as he fell. He clawed for purchase, fingers scraping at empty air. The dune roared past him, sand pouring like water. The desert swallowed him whole. The fall was fast and brutal. Rope screamed through the anchor clip. His harness bit into his hips and pelvis. He swung hard against the side of a tunnel wall before the line caught on something, jerking him to a stop so suddenly his teeth clacked together. Then there was silence. The kind of silence that didn't feel empty, it felt wrong. Noah blinked grit from his eyes. The world around him was dark, except for a few shafts of dusty sunlight cutting down through the hole he'd fallen from. His breath echoed off stone walls. And beneath him, far, far beneath him, was something impossible. His stomach dropped into nothing. A cavern stretched out below, so vast that collapsed dunes formed a jagged ceiling hundreds of meters above. Dusty beams of light speared through the rupture, illuminating a landscape that should not have existed. A bridge rose from the chasm, not spanning it, but growing from it, a colossal lattice of steel and cable that climbed upward like the skeleton of a sleeping god. It wasn't just a bridge, it was a city. Dozens of platforms hung from the structure, connected by rope walkways and metal catwalks. Lights, hundreds of them, glowed in the depths, clustered like bioluminescent creatures in dark water. The air was alive with sound, faint voices, the ring of tools, the whispering hum of stressed metal. Noah's heart hammered in his chest. What the hell? He was still staring when the rope above him twitched. Something moved fast. A cable sang past his ear, a sharp whistle of braided steel cutting the air. Then, before he could react, a hand clamped onto his harness and yanked him sideways. His body slammed against a narrow catwalk, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. Sand ground between his armor plates as he gasped for breath. He coughed once, twice, then froze. Someone was crouched over him. Her skin was blue, not paint, actual pigmentation, deep cobalt fatting to slate at the joints. She wore armor cobbled together from woven belts and salvaged buckles, leather straps crossing her torso in geometric patterns. Her eyes were pale gray, almost silver, and utterly calm. "Don't move," she said. Her voice was low, controlled. "Here, a step is a vote on who lives." Noah tried to sit up. Her hand pressed him flat. Calloused palm, dirt under her nails, the pressure was precise. He coughed again. "I'm Noah Cade." She didn't smile. "Siren." "What is this place?" Her eyes flicked over the catwalk's edge. "A bad place to fall." They moved quickly. Siren pulled him along a narrow walkway that swayed with every step. Below them, the chasm stretched deeper than his flashlight could reach. On the far side, carved into the cavern wall, figures in rust-colored robes watched silently. Belts hung from their waists, glinting with blades. One of them lifted a cone of polished bone to its mouth. The sound that followed wasn't human. It was a deep, resonant call that vibrated through the bridge itself, a voice amplified by steel and stone until it filled the entire cavern. Siren's jaw tightened. "Sirs casting," she murmured. "A king has fallen from the sun." "What does that mean?" Noah asked. "When the bridge calls you king," she said quietly. "It's an obituary with manners." They reached a vertical shaft lined with rope ladders and pulley lifts. Siren clipped his harness to a descender and began lowering them both deeper into the structure. The air grew cooler, thicker, carrying the scent of oil and rust. What Noah saw as they descended took his breath away. The bridge wasn't just a structure, it was a world. Streets welded directly to support beams. Homes constructed from shipping containers and scrap metal, bolted to trusses and suspended over empty space. Children played on platforms connected by rope bridges, wearing washers and nuts as jewelry, and tapping bolts in rhythmic patterns, heads tilted, listening. An old woman counted time by tapping a spoon against a plate, nodding as if the metal was speaking back. Everywhere he looked, the city moved in time with the bridge's slow, organic sway. People walked with the rhythm, bodies unconsciously compensating like sailors on a ship. Old men whispered to corroded bolts like saints. One pressed his ear to a beam, eyes closed, listening to something only he could hear. "How long has this been here?" Noah breathed. 3 generations, Siren said. "Maybe 4. The bridge was here first. Old world construction. We don't know who built it or why. We just know it holds us." "Holds you from what?" She glanced up toward the fractured ceiling, where sunlight and desert waited beyond. "From that." They reached a wide platform reinforced with cross-bracing. Figures in robes waited there, their faces masked and their eyes cold. Siren unclipped Noah's harness and stepped back, her hand resting casually, but not innocently, on the blade at her hip. The crowd parted. An older man stepped forward. His face was lined with scars, faint parallel marks across both cheeks. Wire burns, Noah realized, restraint marks. His eyes were sharp and assessing, the kind of gaze that weighed people as easily as steel. "I am the Seer," he announced, "speaker of the bridge's will, reader of stress and strain." "I'm an engineer," Noah said, still catching his breath. "I calculate stress, I don't speak for it." A ripple of murmurs swept through the gathered scifi. Some sneered, others stared with open curiosity. The Seer's smile was thin. "We count not by years but by repairs," he said. "The bridge chooses, the bridge speaks, we listen." He reached into his robe and produced something, a twisted ring made of braided cable, the strands work-hardened and corroded. He held it high. "The crown of load," he said. "The finder bears the weight." Noah stepped back. "I don't want." "The bridge has already decided." The Seer placed the ring on Noah's head. It was heavier than it looked, the sharp edges digging into his scalp. The weight pressed down like the memory of every failure he'd ever carried, like 14 names whispered into his ear. "You crossed the threshold," the Seer said. "You survived the fall, you carry the king's burden now." Noah reached up to remove it. Siren caught his wrist. "Don't," she said softly. "Not here, not yet." "Why not?" "Because refusal is confession," she murmured, "and confession is weight." "And weight," he asked, "requires balance." The ceremony ended, but the questions did not. They led Noah deeper into the bridge, past workshops where welders patched rusted joints, sparks cascading into the dark. Past water haulers moving buckets on pulleys that swayed in time with the bridge's oscillation. Past children laughing, their games syncing with the rhythm of stressed steel. It was beautiful, it was terrifying. Everywhere he looked, he saw signs of strain, cracks spiderwebbing across gusset plates, bolts stretched beyond tolerance, vibration harmonics that sang too high. The bridge was failing, slowly, quietly, but inevitably. And if it went, it would take thousands of lives with it. Noah's chest tightened. Not again. Not this time. He would not watch another structure fail. He would not memorize another list of names. Somewhere far above, wind howled across the desert. But down here, deep beneath the sand, something else was stirring, a hum too deep to be wind, too alive to be mere vibration. The bridge was singing. And Noah Cade, stranded, crowned, and utterly alone, realized he might be the only one who could hear the warning. The cable crown dug into Noah's scalp, every jagged edge a reminder that he was no longer just a stranger here. Whether he liked it or not, he was now a symbol, a tool. a weapon wrapped in flesh. They brought him to a chamber deeper inside the bridge, a circular hall built around a single vertical beam the width of a skyscraper's core. The beam rose into darkness and plunged into shadow below, humming faintly with the weight of 1,000 lives. Faded inscriptions, prayers or load calculations, he couldn't tell, were carved into its surface. "This is the spine," Seers said quietly beside him. "It holds everything. Without it, the bridge would fall." "It's already falling," Noah muttered. Her eyes narrowed. "Careful, words like that can get you killed." Across the chamber, Seers Tzurn approached. His copper-threaded robes caught the lamplight as he circled Noah like a vulture, inspecting a meal. His gaze lingered on the cable crown as though it confirmed something he had long suspected. "Do you feel it?" Tzurn asked, voice smooth as polished steel. "The weight." Noah met his gaze. "I feel metal fatigue, microfractures, tension cycles out of spec. That's what I feel." The Seers' smile didn't waver. "Words from the tongue of an engineer, yet the bridge chose you. It could have devoured you in the sand. It could have snapped your bones on the fall, but it did not. It delivered you to us alive, crowned." "Because a rope caught me," Noah said. "Not fate, not faith, rope." The room went deathly silent. Dozens of robed figures shifted uneasily. A few spat on the ground. Others whispered prayers under their breath. Tzurn didn't blink. "You think this is about rope, about steel, about numbers? Foolish man. We have survived for generations because the spine wills it, because we believe." "Belief doesn't stop cracks," Noah said, voice rising. "Belief doesn't change the laws of physics, and physics says your bridge is dying." The Seers' smile vanished. "Watch your tongue, fallen king. You stand where none have stood. You bear a crown you did not earn." "I don't want your crown," Noah shot back. "I want to save lives." "Then prove it." The Seer clapped his hands. The chamber doors swung open. Robed guards stepped forward, carrying something between them, a twisted coil of old steel, like a relic pulled from a grave. "Tonight," Tzurn said, "you will show us if your physics can stand where faith has stood for generations." The trial was not optional. By dusk, half the city had gathered on the great platform, a vast circular stage suspended by cables thicker than trees. Lanterns hung from every crossbeam, their orange glow casting long shadows over the abyss below. Drums pounded from somewhere unseen, each beat vibrating through the metal beneath Noah's boots. At the platform's edge, Tzurn raised his hands. "The bridge speaks through challenge," he called. "If the fallen king truly understands its voice, let him walk the path." The crowd erupted in chants. "Path, path, path," the word echoed off the steel like a heartbeat. The path was a beam, narrow, rusted, and slick with centuries of wear. It stretched across a void nearly 10 meters wide, ending at a pillar carved with hundreds of symbols. No railings, no safety lines. A single misstep meant death. Noah stared at it. "You want me to cross that?" Seers appeared beside him, her face pale beneath the blue pigment of her skin. "If you refuse," she said softly, "they'll call you a coward, maybe even a heretic, and heretics don't last long down here." "I'm not here to prove anything." "Then prove nothing," she said, "but do it alive." The crowd grew louder. 1,000 eyes burned into him. The crown felt heavier. The weight of expectations pressed against his chest like a hand. "Fine," he muttered. "Let's do it." He stepped onto the beam. The world shrank to a single line of steel. Every vibration thrummed through his boots, subtle oscillations, the shifting weight of the structure, the pulse of a living city clinging to a dead thing. He kept his knees loose, his weight centered, his breaths measured. He didn't look down. Halfway across, the tone of the metal changed. It was subtle at first, a low hum deepening into a groan. His engineer's instincts flared. Something was wrong. He crouched and pressed his hand to the beam. A hairline fracture, fresh, widening with every step he took. He looked back, too far to retreat. Forward, still 4 meters to go. "Seers," he shouted, "this thing about to." A loud crack split the air. The beam jerked beneath him. Screams echoed from the crowd. For one sickening moment, Noah felt the beam fall away. He lunged forward, barely catching the far platform's lip with his hands. The crown slipped from his head, clattering into the darkness below. 2 strong arms seized his harness and hauled him up. Seers, her breath was ragged, her hands trembling. "You're insane," she hissed. "Physics," he gasped. Not faith, physics almost killed me. The crowd roared not in triumph but confusion. Their king had fallen and survived again. T-Zurin's face twisted into something unreadable. Blasphemy, someone shouted. No, a sign, cried another. The murmurs grew louder, splitting the faithful. For the first time, Noah saw cracks forming not in steel but in belief. Later, in the quiet of a side chamber, Sirin paced back and forth. You should be dead, she said. That beam was supposed to hold. Supposed to, Noah repeated. Until it didn't. That's what happens when you don't inspect your infrastructure for stress fractures every few decades. She stopped packing. Stress fractures. Tiny cracks, he explained. Metal fatigue, they start small, invisible, but they grow, and when they grow, structures fail. Sirin frowned. You speak of this like it's alive. In a way it is, Noah said. Structures talk, vibrations, frequencies, load distributions, they're all language. The bridge is screaming right now and no one's listening. Her gaze softened. Maybe they forgot how. Noah leaned back against the wall, exhaustion settling into his bones. Then I'll remind them. The Seers summoned him again at dawn. This time the chamber was empty except for the two of them. T-Zurin stood by the spine, his staff pressed against the humming metal. His expression was unreadable. You embarrassed me, he said. I saved your life, Noah replied. Faith has saved us for centuries. Faith hasn't stopped the cracks. T-Zurin turned, his eyes colder than the steel around them. You think yourself a savior. You think your numbers and your tools can replace the will of the bridge. I don't want to replace anything, Noah said. I want to help, but help means listening to the structure, not worshipping it. The Seer stepped closer. You are dangerous, Noah Cade, dangerous to my people, dangerous to their faith, dangerous to the balance that has held us together. Maybe the balance is already broken. Something flickered in T-Zurin's gaze, not anger but fear. You will not spread your poison, he said finally. Not here. Noah's chest tightened. What does that mean? It means, T-Zurin said, that the next trial will not be so merciful. The trial came sooner than expected. Noah woke to chaos. Bells rang through the bridge, deep, resonant tones that made the structure vibrate beneath his feet. Sirin burst into his chamber, eyes wide. Spine harmonic is rising, she said. I've never heard it this high. What does that mean? Noah asked, already pulling on his boots. It means something failing. They ran. The streets were alive with panic. Families clutched children as they fled across swaying platforms. Workers abandoned their posts. Prayers mixed with screams as a deep, throbbing groan echoed through the structure. They reached a viewing platform overlooking the spine, and Noah's heart stopped. A vertical support column, thick as a building, was splitting down the center. Hairline cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. Plates buckled. Rivets sheared away, pinging into the abyss. Oh no, Noah whispered. The primary load-bearing assembly. Can we fix it? Sirin asked. Not if we wait. Without another word, Noah leapt into motion. He traced the stress paths in his mind, mapping the structure's invisible skeleton. Every beam, every cable, every force line. He pointed to 3 smaller supports branching from the main column. There, he said, if we can redirect load through those, we might buy time. How? Sirin demanded. Ropes, pulleys, tension lines, anything that can take load. Sirin barked orders in her own language. Workers appeared, their faces pale but determined. They dragged thick ropes from storage, running them through pulleys and securing them to beams. Noah guided them, clove hitch here, truckers not there, anchor point on the cross brace. The bridge groaned again, louder this time. Dust rained from the ceiling. The ground trembled underfoot. Hurry, Noah shouted. We're running out of time. A sudden clang rang out from above. Noah looked up and froze. High above them, a cluster of robed figures moved along the support beams. He recognized the copper-threaded robe immediately. T-Zurin. What the hell is he doing? Noah hissed. Sirin followed his gaze and went pale. He's cutting the safety anchors. What? He means to let the spine fail, she said, horror dawning. If the bridge collapses, he'll say it was judgment, that faith demanded it. The structure groaned again, a death rattle this time. Plates began to buckle, bolts screamed. Noah's blood turned cold. Then we stop him. Siren's eyes met his. How? Noah clenched his fists. We climb. The ladder leading upward was narrow and treacherous. Wind howled through the hollow chamber, carrying the metallic tang of stressed steel. Below them, the spine screamed, its voice rising toward catastrophe. Halfway up, Siren glanced down. If he cuts those anchors... He won't, Noah said. I won't let him. The platform shook violently. A support cable snapped somewhere below, the sound like a gunshot. The entire bridge lurched sideways. Siren grabbed the ladder, knuckles white. We're out of time. Noah climbed faster, breath ragged, muscles burning. Above, T-Zurin raised his staff, the blade at its tip gleaming. He brought it down on the anchor line. The cable frayed, snapped, recoiled into darkness. The bridge screamed, and Noah Cade was still 3 meters away. The cable snapped with a sound like thunder. The vibration roared through the structure, a shudder Noah felt deep in his bones. For a moment, everything held, then the bridge shifted. A sickening, lurching movement that made platforms tilt and walkways sway. Noah, Siren shouted from below. He didn't answer, he was already climbing. 3 meters, 2. His hands burned against the metal rungs, muscles screaming in protest. Above him, T-Zurin swung the blade again, targeting another anchor. The zealot's movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, a priest performing a sacrifice. Stop, Noah yelled. T-Zurin looked down, his expression calm, almost pitying. You cannot stop the will of the bridge. It's not will, Noah shouted. It's physics, and you're about to kill thousands. T-Zurin raised the blade again. Noah lunged. His shoulder slammed into the Heisier's waist, knocking the older man off balance. The staff clattered against the steel, its blade scraping sparks. Both men crashed against the narrow platform, hands grappling for leverage. You don't understand, T-Zurin hissed, his face twisted with conviction. Our faith is what holds this place together. Without it, we are nothing. Then you're nothing already, Noah snarled, because faith won't stop gravity. The Heisier's knee drove into his chest, knocking the air from his lungs. The world spun. Noah's fingers scrambled for purchase, barely catching a crossbeam before he slipped into the abyss below. T-Zurin staggered back toward the anchor. His blade rose again. Don't, Noah gasped. Too late. The second anchor snapped. The platform beneath them tilted sharply. T-Zurin stumbled, arms pinwheeling. Noah reached out instinctively and caught his wrist. For a heartbeat, they hung there, the zealot and the engineer, faith and science dangling above annihilation. Let me go, T-Zurin spat. No, Noah grunted. I don't let people fall. The old man's eyes widened, and for the first time there was fear in them. Real, human fear. He clung to Noah's arm as the structure screamed beneath them. Hold on, Noah shouted. I can. Yes, you can, Noah hauled with everything he had. His shoulder tore with pain, but he didn't let go. Inch by inch, he pulled the Heisier back onto the platform. They collapsed together, gasping, sweat pouring down their faces. T-Zurin stared at him, chest heaving. Why save me? Because you're not the enemy, Noah said, panting. Ignorance is. Below them, the spine groaned, louder now, deeper, more desperate. Without the anchors, load distribution was failing. If they didn't act fast, the entire bridge would follow. We have to move, Noah said, pushing himself up. Help me secure a counterline. T-Zurin hesitated, torn between doctrine and survival. If this is judgment. This is math, Noah roared. Now help me or everyone dies. Something broke in the Heisier's expression, a crack in his certainty. Slowly he nodded. They worked side by side, two enemies united by necessity. Noah tied friction hitches around the remaining support beams, threading ropes through pulleys to redirect load. T-Zurin followed his instructions without question, his hands shaking but steady. Pull on 3, Noah said. 1, 2, 3. They heaved, the ropes creaked under strain, biting into the steel. The spine shuddered, then steadied, its vibration shifting from a death rattle to a heavy, exhausted groan. It wasn't fixed, not even close, but it was holding. Below the city was chaos, platforms swayed, ropes snapped, children screamed, entire streets tilted toward the void. Siren barked orders, her voice cutting through panic. Anchor those lines, she shouted. Move weight away from the center, and someone get those water drums tied down. Noah and Teaserin climbed down, their bodies bruised and trembling. The moment his boots hit the platform, Sirin grabbed him by the shoulders. "Are you insane?" she yelled. "You could have died." "Yeah," Noah coughed, "but then who would fix this mess?" "Mess," she echoed, gesturing around them. "Half the city is about to fall." "Not if we change the load distribution," he said. "We need to reduce stress on the spine before it propagates." "Speak plainly." "We move people," Noah said, "off the central platforms onto the peripheral walkways, redistribute weight evenly." Siren stared at him, then nodded. "You heard him," she yelled to the workers. "Shift weight outward, move anything heavy." The city became a coordinated frenzy. Crates, water tanks, even homes were dragged outward, redistributed along the bridge's edges. The spines groaning eased slightly with every kilogram shifted. "Good," Noah muttered. "Good." Then something slammed into the platform. A shockwave, a metallic scream. The floor buckled beneath them, throwing people off their feet. Siren hit the ground hard, her head smacking against a support beam. Noah crawled to her, panic clawing at his throat. "Siren, talk to me." Her eyes fluttered open. I'm fine." "Stay with me," he said. "We're not done." The spine was still trembling, its harmonic frequency rising again. Noah knew the signs, the same signs he had ignored once before. The last time a bridge had collapsed. 14 people had died. He still saw their faces in his dreams. "Not again." "Ropes," he shouted. "We need more ropes." "There are none left," a worker yelled back. "Then make some," Noah barked. "Cut cables, tear cloth, I don't care, just bring me something with tensile strength." They did. Dozens of hands moved at once, stripping cables from abandoned catwalks, braiding them into makeshift lines. Noah guided them, his voice steady even as the structure beneath him screamed. "Anchor here," he ordered, "and here double hitch, no slack." It was chaos, but controlled chaos. People followed orders, they worked as one. And slowly, impossibly, the bridge began to calm. The harmonic dropped, the vibration steadied. The terrible groaning turned into a low, rhythmic hum. It wasn't perfect, the structure was still wounded, but it was alive. Hours later, when the dust settled and the adrenaline wore off, Noah found himself sitting on the edge of a catwalk, staring into the abyss below. Siren sat beside him, her head bandaged, her breathing slow but steady. "You saved them," she said softly. "No," Noah said, "we did." She looked at him, her pale gray eyes searching his face. "You could have left. You could have saved yourself." "Could have," he admitted. "Didn't want to." "Why?" He thought about it, about Earth, about the 14 names etched into the back of his skull, about the mistakes that had haunted him since that day. "Because I failed once," he said quietly. "I won't fail again." Siren didn't reply. She didn't have to. Across the city, people were gathering. They had seen what happened, seen a man with no faith save their world with nothing but rope, math, and stubbornness. They were talking, whispering, questioning. Even the Heisier was silent. "Do you think they'll listen now?" Siren asked. "I think," Noah said, "that they don't have a choice." But T-Zurin was not finished. In the aftermath, he disappeared. Rumors spread like wildfire that he had been cast down by the bridge itself, that he had gone to commune with its voice. But Noah knew better. The zealot wasn't gone, he was planning. 3 days later, his plan revealed itself. Noah was inspecting the damaged gusset plate, a critical connection point between 2 massive trusses, when a messenger ran up, breathless and pale. "They're gathering," she said, "at the Court of Strain, all of them." "Who?" Siren asked. "The Seers," the messenger whispered, "every one of them." Noah felt his stomach twist. The Seers, the bridge's most devoted believers, its enforcers and zealots, had not forgiven him for what happened. If they were gathering, it meant only one thing. "Trouble," he muttered. They reached the court minutes later, a vast open chamber built into the spine itself. Hundreds of robed figures stood in a circle, their faces hidden by hoods. At the center stood T-Zurin, his voice booming through the chamber. "This man," he declared, pointing at Noah, "has poisoned our faith. He speaks of numbers and ropes and metal, but he does not speak for the bridge." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "He calls himself Savior," T-Zurin continued. "But he is an invader, a corrupter, and today we decide his fate." Siren stepped forward. "Without him, you'd all be dead." Blasphemy, someone shouted. Heretic, cried another. The mob surged forward, voices rising, knives flashing. Noah backed away, heart pounding. Stay behind me, Siren whispered, drawing her blade. But then a voice from the crowd. He saved my son. Silence, heads turned. A woman stepped forward, her hands trembling. When the platforms fell, I thought my boy was gone, but she pointed at Noah. He caught him. He tied him down with those knots. He saved him. Another voice. He told us where to anchor the lines. Without that, my home would be gone. Then another. He stopped the collapse. And another. He made the bridge sing again. The crowd's fury faltered. Murmurs shifted. Anger softened into doubt. Zuren's eyes blazed. Do not be fooled. This man will destroy everything we are. No, Siren said, stepping forward. He will save what you could not. For a long moment, the chamber hung in silence, a balance point between two futures. Then a sound cut through the tension. Crack. The floor trembled, dust fell from the ceiling. Deep below, the spine groaned again. The bridge was failing. Again. Noah's heart sank. We're out of time. Siren's hand found his. Then we fix it. Zuren's voice rose above the chaos. Do nothing. This is the bridge's will. Noah turned to the crowd. It's not will, it's physics, and if you don't move now, you'll all die. The structure screamed, a sound no one could mistake for divine will. It was the voice of metal tearing apart. And this time, even the faithful began to run. The scream of the bridge was no longer background noise. It was a living, violent thing, a monstrous groan that vibrated through the steel beneath Noah's boots and crawled up into his bones. Every instinct screamed run, but there was nowhere to run. The structure was dying. Chunks of rusted plating rained down from above. Cables quivered and snapped like whipcords. Platforms tilted, spilling crates and tools into the abyss below. People shouted, panicked, clung to whatever they could as the city swayed like a ship caught in a storm. Where's the failure? Siren shouted over the chaos. Everywhere, Noah yelled back, but the worst of it's in the spine. How long do we have? He didn't answer because he didn't know. The vibration frequency was too high, too chaotic. It wasn't just one component failing anymore. It was systemic. Like a chain reaction, the first crack had spread through the entire structure, pushing every joint, every beam, every cable toward breaking point. And once the failure started, it would not stop. Unless... We have to redistribute the load now, Noah shouted. Get everyone away from the central walkway. Already on it. Siren vanished into the chaos, shouting orders with the voice of someone who had done this before. People listened, not because they understood the math, but because they trusted her, and that was enough for now. Noah sprinted toward the primary gusset plate, the same one he had examined days ago. He knew before he reached it what he would find. Hairline cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, radiating from the bolt holes. The steel was cold under his glove, the vibration violent and erratic. The crack was running. Once it propagated past a certain point, nothing in the universe could stop it. Talk to me, he whispered to the metal, pressing his ear against it. Come on, tell me where you're weak. The steel hummed beneath his palm. The vibration shifted, cycling in irregular bursts too fast, too close to resonance. We're out of time, he muttered. A roar echoed from across the chasm. Noah turned and saw the crowd gathering again, hundreds of robed figures pouring into the court of strain, their chants rising above the bridge's groans. Zuren, Siren hissed beside him, blade drawn. The High Seer stood atop a suspended platform, arms raised to the trembling ceiling. The bridge judges us, he shouted. This is not physics, this is punishment. The crowd roared back, their fear twisting into fanaticism. Some were crying, some were praying, others reached for their knives. We don't have time for this, Siren growled. They'll never listen, Noah said, chest heaving. Not to me. They don't have to. She turned and grabbed a nearby worker, a young boy no older than 15. Grime streaked across his cheeks. Get me a descender harness, she barked, and a tension line heavy gauge move. The boy sprinted off. Siren faced Noah again, her eyes cold and sharp. You're going out there, she said. He blinked. Out where? On the king's rib. The words hit him like a punch. Are you insane? That's 8 meters of open lattice over nothing. That's why they'll believe, she said, because only a fool or a king would walk it. Noah stared down at the narrow beam stretching across the chasm. It was barely wide enough for his boots. No railings, no safety net. A single mistake and he'd fall into darkness so deep he'd never stop screaming. Last time I did something like this, his voice cracked. People died. Last time you ignored the math, Seers said quietly. This time the math is all you have. The boy returned with the harness and rope. Seers clipped it onto Noah herself, her hands steady despite the tremor in her breath. Do you trust your knots? She asked. He nodded. Do you? She hesitated, then nodded too. With my life. The chants were deafening by the time they reached the beam. T-Zurin, the crowd roared. Judgment, judgment. The High Seer's voice carried above them all. Let the false king prove his words. Let him walk the bridge he claims to understand. Noah stood at the edge of the lattice. Wind from the abyss whipped at his clothes. Below, the city stretched in all directions, a web of platforms and lights suspended over nothing. Above, the desert sun bled through the fractured ceiling, painting the steel in shades of gold and red. Seers stepped close, her hand brushing his arm. Listen, she said. To what? The bridge. If it sings, you're safe. If it screams. She didn't finish. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the beam. The lattice flexed under his weight, groaning in protest. Noah froze, heart hammering. Beneath him was nothing, just a black gulf that seemed to go on forever. One step at a time, he told himself, one equation at a time. His boots clanged against the steel. The vibration shifted slightly lower, steadier. He took another step, then another. The note rose, then fell. It wasn't screaming, not yet. Behind him, the crowd had fallen silent. Even the zealots were watching now, their breath held. Somewhere far below, a child cried. Talk to me, Noah whispered to the bridge. Come on, where are you weakest? 3 bolts ahead, the harmonic shifted, sharp and brittle, a frequency that didn't belong. A failing connection. Got you, he breathed. He knelt carefully, balancing his weight. The crack was running straight toward this point. If it reached the bolt, the entire structure would shear. Secondary load lines, he murmured. Fail-safe geometry. It had to be redirected, but how? Then he remembered something his mentor had said years ago, standing on another bridge in another storm. Load wants a path. Give it one or it'll make its own. Noah unclipped the secondary rope from his harness and looped it around the beam, securing it with a clove hitch. He tied another knot and another, building a crude web of tension lines. If he was right, it would shift enough stress away from the failing bolt to slow the crack. If he was wrong, don't think about it, he muttered. Just trust the math. He stood and took another step. The vibration changed, deeper now, more even. The crack slowed. But then, snap. The rope parted behind him. Noah's stomach dropped. The lattice tilted. His harness yanked hard against his chest, the remaining lines screaming under the load. The fail-safe had engaged. It held. Barely. The crack stopped moving. The vibration steadied. Noah exhaled shakily. Come on, hold just a little longer. He moved again, every step measured, every breath calculated. Load paths translated through his arches like braille. 3 bolts, 2 breaths, 1 chance. And then silence. The bridge stopped screaming. For the first time in hours, the structure's voice shifted from chaos to harmony. A low, steady hum that resonated through the steel and into the hearts of everyone listening. It was holding. The crowd erupted not with prayers but with cheers. Even the zealots were on their knees, stunned into silence. Seers was crying openly now, her hands clasped against her mouth. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. Noah smiled just a little. And then the world dropped. The master canopy line, the one anchoring the upper third of the structure, snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The bridge lurched violently. Entire streets swung out of alignment, beams twisted, platforms tilted. No, Noah shouted, clinging to the beam. The line gone, Seers screamed. It's too much. The bridge began to oscillate, a deadly rhythmic sway that built with every second. It was like watching a skyscraper in an earthquake, every movement amplifying the next. People screamed, tools and furniture flew into the void. The city was seconds from tearing itself apart. And then Noah saw it, the old counterweight drum, a massive rusted cylinder once used to stabilize the bridge's movement. It was still there, still connected. "Feed the rope," he yelled. "We can bleed off the momentum." "What?" "Friction brake. We use the drum as a brake." Siren's eyes widened. Then she was shouting orders, her voice cutting through panic like a blade. "Hands to the drum, everyone." Dozens ran, then hundreds. Rope was wrapped around the drum's circumference, layer upon layer. People pulled once, twice in rhythm. The rope screamed against the metal, friction heat burning the air. Smoke curled upward, skin tore, hands bled. But the oscillation slowed. The bridge fought back, groaning and twisting. A rivet sheared free above, pinging into the dark. Another beam buckled, but still they pulled. "Harder," Noah shouted. "We're almost there." The sway decreased 10 degrees, 8, 5. And then, finally, mercifully, the bridge stopped moving. Silence fell over the city, a silence so deep, so raw, that no one dared to break it. They had done it. They had stopped the collapse. Noah slumped against the beam, every muscle trembling. Siren stumbled toward him, blood streaking her hands, sweat cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "You're insane," she whispered. He laughed, weak, breathless. "I get that a lot." The celebration didn't last. When Noah glanced at the king's rib, his blood ran cold. The hairline crack was still there, and it was spreading again, slow but unstoppable. He stared at it for a long moment, then he turned to Siren. "How long do we have?" Her eyes followed his. "Hours, maybe less." "Then we're not done," he said. She frowned. "What are you thinking?" He pointed to the failing joint. "We can't fix it from here. We need to redistribute weight manually. I'll go out, position myself as a mobile jack point." "What?" "If I stand on that beam, I can shift the stress enough to keep the crack from running. You adjust the counterline from here." Her face went pale. "If it shifts wrong, you'll fall." "Then I fall." "Noah, do you trust the math?" Siren's throat worked. Finally, she nodded. "I trust it." "Then clip me in," he said. She did, hands trembling as she secured the harness. Her eyes were wet when she stepped back. "Come back," she whispered. He didn't answer. Noah stepped out onto the beam again, the bridge moaning beneath his boots. Hundreds of eyes followed his every move. Every breath was a prayer. Every heartbeat was a countdown. He positioned himself above the crack. The vibration changed immediately, deeper, steadier. The stress pattern shifted, the crack slowed. "Quarter turn," he shouted. Siren turned the counterline, the note steadied. "Two more." The steel hummed like a living thing, harmonics aligned. For one breathless moment it was perfect. And then pop. A fiber line snapped, the balance shifted, the rib dipped. And Noah understood. If he stayed, his weight would pull the structure out of tune. The crack would run, the bridge would fall. If he let go, the bridge might hold. He looked at Siren. She read his face immediately, and instead of pleading, she nodded. "If you fall," she said, her voice trembling, "I fall." He smiled, small, sad, certain. And he let go. Noah let go. The world slowed. For a heartbeat, he was weightless, floating in a space between fear and flight, between choice and consequence. The wind roared around him, cold and sharp as razors. Steel beams and glowing lanterns streaked past in a blur. Below, the city stretched into the abyss like a spider's web strung across eternity. Then gravity took him. The fall tore the air from his lungs. The harness line screamed against its anchor as it uncoiled, then snapped taut. The jolt ripped through his spine, wrenching his shoulders. For a moment, everything went white. He dangled in silence. Above, the bridge groaned, but it did not collapse. The crack slowed, the harmonic shifted, the stress redistributed. It was holding. It was working. "Noah," Siren's voice shattered the silence, echoing from far above. "Are you alive?" "Mostly," he croaked, pain lancing through his ribs. "Remind me to sue someone when this is over." There was laughter, ragged, disbelieving laughter from the platform above. But it was quickly drowned by the city's roar. People were screaming again, but not in panic this time. They were cheering, chanting his name. "Noah, Noah, Noah." Hanging over the abyss, battered and bleeding, Noah Cade, disgraced engineer, failed savior, realized something. They no longer saw him as a stranger, not an invader, not a heretic. They saw him as one of them. It took 2 hours to pull him back up. The harness burned against his body, every meter of ascent a reminder of the toll this fight had taken. By the time Siren and 2 workers dragged him onto the platform, his legs barely held his weight. His knuckles were shredded raw. Blood matted his hair where the cable crown had once rested. Siren dropped to her knees beside him. "You stupid, stupid human." He managed a weak grin. "Told you I don't let people fall." She punched his arm gently. "Next time, try not to throw yourself instead." Around them, the city was a frenzy of activity. Teams of workers moved across platforms, tying new braces, rerouting cables, sealing cracks with molten resin. Children carried tools to adults. Priests and engineers worked side by side. No one argued about faith or physics anymore. They simply worked. "Look at them," Siren whispered. "They're listening, they're learning." Noah watched as a group of robed Seers hauled a new support beam into place, their chants now mixed with engineering terms they barely understood. Others etched old prayers alongside new formulas on the spine, treating both as sacred text. Belief, Noah murmured, and math side by side. "It was never one or the other," Siren said. "We just forgot." But victory was a fragile thing. At dawn, the tremors returned, softer now, but insistent. The structure was still unstable. Too many cracks, too many worn joints, too many centuries of neglect. Noah stood before the spine once more, his hands pressed against the cold steel. He listened, felt, calculated. "The system's compromised," he said at last. "Even with the load redistributed, the harmonic is still rising, slowly but steadily." "How long?" Siren asked. "Days, a week if we're lucky." She stared at the massive column, her face unreadable. "We don't have the resources to rebuild this. Not here, not now." "I know. So what do we do?" Noah turned to her. "We decouple." Her brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means we isolate the failing sections," he explained. "We cut them loose, literally. That'll reduce the load on the remaining structure and buy us time to reinforce it." "Cut them loose," she repeated, horror dawning. "You mean drop them into the abyss?" "Yes. Those sections hold homes, entire districts." "I know," he said softly, "but if we don't, the whole bridge goes down." Siren's jaw tightened. "They'll never agree to that." "They will if you ask them." Her eyes flicked up to his. "Me. You're the one they trust, the one they'll listen to, not the fallen king." Siren was silent for a long moment, then she nodded. "I'll talk to them." The council met that night in the Court of Strain. Dozens of elders, priests, and engineers filled the chamber, their faces drawn and exhausted. The tension was a living thing, a storm waiting to break. Siren stood before them, her voice steady but heavy. "We have no choice. If we don't decouple the failing sections, the entire city will fall." The chamber erupted into shouts. "Blasphemy! You would destroy our homes. Better to trust the bridge's will." "Will doesn't change tensile limits," Noah snapped. "Steel doesn't care what you believe, it only cares how much weight you put on it." "Silence," someone shouted. "You speak as if you know the bridge." "I do," Noah growled, "because I listened to it." The room fell silent. He stepped forward, eyes sweeping across the assembly. "I've built bridges, I've watched them live, and I've watched them die. Everyone tells a story if you listen, and this one is saying it's tired. It can't hold everything anymore." Tzurin rose from the far end of the chamber, his expression unreadable. "And if we do this, if we cut away our homes, how many will die?" "Maybe hundreds," Noah admitted. "But if we don't, everyone will." The silence that followed was the longest of Noah's life. Finally, Tzurin spoke again. "And you are certain this will work?" "No," Noah said honestly, "but it's the only chance we have." The Heistier's gaze lingered on him, searching, weighing. Then he nodded once. "Then let us prepare." The evacuation began at sunrise. Families packed what little they could carry. Entire neighborhoods, centuries old, were emptied in hours. Children cried as they left their homes. Elders wept as they touched walls they'd never see again. Siren moved among them, offering comfort where she could. Noah stayed at the spine, coordinating the engineering teams. Every line had to be perfect. Every cut had to be precise. One mistake and the entire structure could destabilize. Load paths aligned, one worker reported. Counterweights ready, said another. On your mark, engineer. Noah took a deep breath. Do it. With a deep metallic clang, the first coupler disengaged. A section of the bridge, an entire district of platforms and homes, detached and drifted slowly into the abyss. A second cut, then a third. Each release lightened the load. Each one made the structure groan a little less, but each one also tore a piece of the city away. By the time the last coupler released, nearly a quarter of the city was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. It's done, Seers whispered. Noah nodded. Now we wait. Hours passed, then a day, then two. The harmonic stabilized, the vibration flattened. The bridge's voice, once a scream of dying steel, settled into a deep, exhausted hum. For the first time in decades, the structure was quiet. It's holding, Noah said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's really holding. Cheers erupted across the platforms, people embraced. Children danced, even the Seers wept openly. But Noah didn't celebrate. He stood alone on a high catwalk, staring into the abyss where a quarter of the city had vanished. Somewhere down there, steel and stone were still falling, perhaps forever. Seers joined him quietly. You saved them. Not all, he said. You saved most, and that's more than anyone thought possible. He nodded, but the weight didn't lift. It never did. Every engineer knew the truth. A bridge that could be saved today might still fail tomorrow. We bought time, he said softly. Nothing more. Sometimes, Seers said, placing a hand on his shoulder, time is all we need. But not everyone was content. That night, as the city slept and repair crews worked under the pale glow of lanterns, a figure moved through the shadows, a figure wrapped in copper-threaded robes. Seers stood at the edge of the newly lightened platforms, staring into the abyss where the old districts had fallen. His face was unreadable. His hands trembled. Another robed figure approached. You gave him power, they hissed. You let him destroy what was sacred. I gave him time, Seers said softly. Nothing more. Then we should finish what we started. The Seers turned his gaze upward, toward the spine, toward the heart of the city. No, he whispered, not yet. Then when the bridge decides. And far above them, unseen by any eye, a hairline crack slowly crept across a rusted joint, a whisper of a storm still coming. The bridge held. For the first time in living memory, the city's heartbeat was steady. The endless vibrations, once an angry scream, had softened into a low, contented hum. Streets that had once trembled with every gust of wind now swayed gently, like a ship on calm waters. Children played on suspended walkways without fear. Workers sang as they repaired beams, and people spoke Noah Cade's name with something approaching reverence. But Noah didn't feel like a savior. He felt like a man who had placed a bandage over a mortal wound. Because deep down he knew the truth, the bridge was still dying. Stress readings are stable, Seers reported, crouched over a worn sensor display. Main load paths are balanced, thermal expansions within limits. Good, Noah said, not looking up from the crack beneath his boots. Now tell me what you see. She sighed. Hairline propagation, about 2 centimeters since yesterday. Exactly, he muttered. It's still spreading. They were standing on the King's Rib, the colossal central beam that held the bridge's weight. A hairline fissure spidered across its surface, thin as a vein but deep enough to keep Noah awake at night. It's slow, Seers said. Weeks before it becomes dangerous. Or hours, Noah countered. Depends on stress cycles, depends on wind load, depends on 100 variables we can't control. He pressed his palm against the steel. The vibration beneath was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A silent heartbeat, a countdown. We don't have weeks, he said. We have to act. Seers folded her arms. You're thinking about the spine project. He nodded. The spine project was the most ambitious plan Noah had ever conceived. A complete reinforcement of the bridge's core using salvaged steel and high-tensile cable. It would mean replacing centuries-old supports, reconfiguring the entire load distribution system, and essentially rebuilding the heart of the city while people still lived inside it. It was risky, expensive, possibly suicidal, and it was the only way to save them. How long would it take? Siren asked quietly. 3 weeks, maybe 4. And if the crack runs before then? Then the city dies, he said simply. Convincing the council was harder than building the plan. The court of strain was packed when Noah presented his proposal. Schematics glowed on the walls, diagrams of new supports, tension lines, counterweights, and dynamic damping systems. He spoke for over an hour, explaining every detail, every calculation, every reason why they needed to act. When he finished, silence filled the chamber. Finally, Seers stood. 4 weeks of work, thousands of hands, all based on the word of a man who has already torn down a quarter of our city. That sacrifice saved your lives, Noah said. It delayed our deaths, Seers replied. You admit the bridge still fails. It will always fail, Noah snapped. That's what structures do. They degrade, they break, they need maintenance. That's not a flaw, that's the nature of things. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others looked unconvinced. Seers stepped forward, his voice cold and steady. And if we do nothing, then the bridge will collapse within months. And if we attempt this plan and fail, then it collapses sooner. The chamber erupted in shouts, fear, anger, doubt. Siren rose and raised her voice above the noise. We have a choice, wait and die or try and fight. Her words cut through the chaos. Slowly the shouting died. Seers' gaze fell on Noah. And if we give you this chance, can you promise success? No, Noah said, but I can promise I won't stop until we find a way. The silence stretched, then at last Seers spoke. Very well, you will have your 3 weeks. The next day, the bridge became a construction site. Teams of welders swarmed the spine. Cargo lifts ferried steel plates and cable spools up from the deepest levels. Rope workers dangled from dizzying heights, weaving new support nets. Sparks rained down from cutting torches as ancient bolts were removed and replaced. Noah barely slept. He lived in the steel, climbing, measuring, welding, calculating. Every hour brought new challenges. Old support plates that were too corroded to hold. Load paths that shifted unpredictably. Resonance frequencies that didn't match the models. But slowly progress came. Primary truss is online, Siren reported on the 10th day. Load transfer successful. Good, Noah said. Begin prepping the secondary cables. The hum of the bridge changed as they worked, deeper now, more stable. It was the sound of a structure rediscovering its strength. For the first time in weeks, Noah allowed himself a sliver of hope. It lasted 3 days. On the 13th night, Siren found him alone on a catwalk, staring at the city lights below. You should rest, she said gently. I will, he murmured, after the next inspection. She hesitated. There's something you need to see. Her voice was too careful, too deliberate. Noah followed her to the north end of the bridge, a maintenance corridor rarely used during the repairs. The air was colder here, quieter. Siren stopped before a steel hatch. Here. Noah opened it and froze. Inside, one of the main support couplers had been cut. Not worn, not fractured, cut. The metal edges were smooth, precise, done by hand. Sabotage, he whispered. Siren nodded grimly. 2 more just like it, hidden deeper in the structure. 2? We don't know, but we have suspects. Noah didn't need names. He already knew. Seers. The evidence piled up over the next 2 days. Bolts removed. Bearings loosened. Weight distribution charts tampered with. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough to cripple the project if left unchecked. When Noah confronted the Seers in the council chamber, the room erupted into chaos. You're sabotaging the bridge, Noah shouted. Seers didn't deny it. He simply smiled. I am ensuring the bridge's will is obeyed. By killing us. By letting nature decide, Seers said calmly. If the bridge fails, it was meant to fail. If it holds, it was meant to hold. That is faith. Faith, Noah's voice shook with fury. Faith doesn't tighten bolts. Faith doesn't weld steel. People do. We build. We hold. Your arrogance blinds you, human, Seers hissed. You think this city lives because of you, but it lives because the bridge chooses to hold us. And when it stops holding, Noah demanded, Will you blame the gods, or will you finally admit you killed it? The chamber fell silent. For a moment Noah thought he'd broken through, but then Seers spoke softly, almost gently. Some truths must be learned the hard way. And with that, he walked out. The sabotage worsened. Cables were cut during the night. Anchor points mysteriously failed. Entire crates of reinforcement materials vanished. Someone even tried to poison the welder's water supply. Fear returned to the city. Old superstitions flared up. Some believed the sabotage was a sign the bridge was rejecting the repairs. Others claimed the Seers was right, that interference was blasphemy. The workforce began to shrink. First dozens, then hundreds refused to continue. And without them, the project would fail. "We're out of time," Seers said, her voice shaking with frustration. "If we lose any more workers, we can't finish." Noah stared at the schematics spread before him. The math was brutal. Without more hands, the structure would collapse before reinforcement could be completed. Then slowly, an idea took shape. "What if we don't finish?" he murmured. Seers blinked. "What?" "What if we don't finish everything?" he said, the plan forming as he spoke. "We don't need the whole bridge stable, just the critical sections. The rest can fail safely." "You mean controlled collapse?" "Exactly." It was risky, reckless, and it might be the only chance they had. 3 nights later, they put the plan into motion. Noah and Seers led a small, loyal team to the King's Rib. They worked in silence, reinforcing only the most vital points: load-bearing nodes, anchor beams, primary tension cables. Everywhere else, they planted controlled failure points, places where the structure could break without bringing the city down. It was a mad plan, but it was one they could finish. "Once this is done," Seers said quietly, tightening the last bolt, "there's no going back." "There never was," Noah said. They finished just before dawn. The sun rose red over the desert as the bridge groaned beneath them, a deep, ominous sound that echoed through the cavern. It was the sound of a living thing nearing the end of its strength. And then the alarms began to sound. "Primary stress spike," a worker shouted. "Load shifting rapidly." "The crack's running," another cried. Noah's blood ran cold. It was too soon. The bridge wasn't ready. "Evacuate non-essential platforms," he shouted. "Now." The city erupted into chaos. People fled across swaying walkways as steel screamed overhead. Massive cables snapped free and whipped through the air. Platforms tore away and vanished into the abyss. The bridge was dying. Seers grabbed his arm. "We need to move." "No," Noah said, his eyes locked on the King's Rib. "We need to finish this." And as the structure shuddered and roared around them, Noah Cade, human engineer, failed savior, stubborn fool, ran toward the heart of the bridge one last time. The bridge screamed. It was not a sound of metal anymore. It was the sound of a wounded animal, vast, furious, desperate. Every beam, every cable, every joint roared under the weight of centuries. Dust rained from the fractured ceiling as the world itself seemed to buckle. Noah ran. The catwalks were no longer stable. They swung wildly beneath his boots as the structure shifted and groaned. He leapt over gaps where platforms had torn loose, ducked under whipping cables that sliced the air like steel serpents. All around him, the city was breaking. "Noah," Seers' voice crackled through the calm, nearly lost in the chaos. "The crack's accelerating, it's moving across the main gusset." "Then we hold it," he shouted back, breath ragged. "We hold it now. You'll never make it in time. Watch me." At the heart of the bridge, the King's Rib had become a monstrous wound. The fissure Noah had spent weeks trying to slow was now a jagged canyon tearing across the steel, lengthening with every shudder. It pulsed like a heartbeat, spreading death through the structure. He reached the site just as the first shear bolts exploded. The sound was deafening, like gunshots fired point blank. Plates shifted. Supports buckled. The floor lurched sideways, nearly pitching him into the void. Seers appeared beside him, gasping, sweat streaking down her cobalt skin. "We're out of time. The crack will run through the whole rib in minutes." "Then we change the load path." "With what?" "With us." Her eyes widened. "You're insane." "Probably," he said, "but you trust my knots, right?" She stared at him for a heartbeat, then nodded. "I trust your knots." Together they scrambled up the nearest support ladder, hauling heavy cable with them. The air was thick with grit and the metallic stench of stressed steel. Sparks rained down from ruptured joints. The world roared around them. Noah anchored the first line to a support beam and hurled the other end across the gap. Seers caught it, threading it through a pulley and securing it on the far side. "Counter-tension," Noah shouted. Seers threw her weight onto the line. The bridge groaned in response, the fissure shuddering as the load shifted slightly away from the failing gusset. "Again," he yelled. They ran another line, and another. Each one redistributed a fraction of the force, buying seconds, but seconds were all they had. The bridge jolted violently, throwing Noah to his knees. A massive section of platform sheared away behind them, falling into the abyss with a thunderous crash. "Main support's gone," Seers screamed over the noise. "We're losing the eastern span." "Then we sacrifice it," Noah growled. "We can't save everything, just enough." He keyed his comm. "All teams pull back from the eastern span, seal off section C4, now." Workers scrambled for safety as the eastern platforms tore free, plunging into the darkness below. The sacrifice sent a shockwave through the rest of the structure, but it held. Barely. They worked like that for what felt like hours, though Noah knew it was only minutes. Every line they set was a desperate gamble. Every adjustment bought them another breath, another heartbeat of life. But it wasn't enough. The main fissure split wider with a sickening shriek, and a support beam tore loose above them. It swung down like a pendulum, smashing into the platform with a blast of sparks. Noah dove aside, the impact rattling his teeth. He scrambled to his feet, chest heaving. "We're running out of options." Seers stared at the crack. Her face was pale, her voice steady. "Then there's only one thing left." Noah followed her gaze and understood. The counterweight drum. It was enormous, a rusted steel cylinder the size of a house, wrapped with kilometers of heavy rope. It had been part of the original design, meant to balance the bridge during seismic shifts, but it hadn't been used in decades. Activating it now would mean feeding the last of their remaining rope into its hungry coils and converting potential energy into controlled resistance. It could save the bridge. It could also tear the whole thing apart. "Do it," Noah said. Seers hesitated. "If we miscalculate, then we die trying." They ran. The drum chamber was chaos. Workers shouted orders over the groaning steel. The bridge listed dangerously to one side, throwing sparks as stressed beams ground against each other. Dozens of hands scrambled to anchor ropes, feed lines, and secure pulleys. Noah grabbed a length of rope and slammed it into the drum's intake slot. "On my mark," he roared. 1, 2, now." The crew heaved. The drum groaned, then began to turn, slowly at first, then faster. The ropes screamed as friction built. Heat radiated from the spinning metal, acrid smoke filling the air. "More tension," Seers shouted. "Feed it through the secondary pulleys." The drum howled like a living thing, resisting the weight of the collapsing city. Sparks erupted as cables tightened, pulling massive beams back into place. The bridge shuddered, groaned, and then, for a terrifying second, stopped moving. Everyone held their breath. Then slowly, the vibration changed. The chaotic shaking softened. The sickening lurching slowed. The bridge's heartbeat, once frantic and irregular, settled into a heavy, powerful rhythm. "It's working," Seers whispered. "Not for long," Noah said. "We need to reinforce the gusset before the tension burns out." They had one final task, sealing the crack. Noah climbed out onto the king's rib, every step a battle against fear. Below him stretched a canyon of darkness. Above, fractured beams swayed like broken bones. The crack lay before him, wide, jagged, and still growing. He pressed his palm against the steel. The vibration thrummed up his arm, weak but steady, still holding. "This is it," he murmured. Seers joined him, carrying the last spool of high-tensile cable. "We anchor here," she said, voice tight with focus. "And here, then we weave." They worked side by side, threading the cable across the fissure in a crisscross pattern, a stitch for the wound in the bridge's heart. Sweat soaked their clothes. Their hands bled from the rough steel. The entire structure trembled underfoot. The final bolt slid into place with a satisfying clang. Noah tightened it and exhaled. "Done," he whispered. Then the bridge roared. The sound shook the air. a deep, resonant bellow that reverberated through every cable and beam. The vibration pulsed beneath their feet, building, rising, until it felt like the entire structure was alive. And then suddenly, silence. The bridge stilled. The screaming stopped. The fissure did not grow. The city held. Cheers erupted from below, workers embraced. Children cried, strangers clung to each other, laughing and sobbing in equal measure. The impossible had happened. The bridge lived. Noah collapsed to his knees, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Siren dropped beside him, laughing breathlessly. "You did it," she said. "We did it," he wanted to say, but his voice failed him. Instead, he just sat there, listening to the sound of the living bridge, steady, calm, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. In the days that followed, something shifted in the city. No longer did people whisper prayers to the steel. No longer did they fear the bridge's moods. Instead, they walked its platforms with purpose. They measured, they checked, they repaired, not because they feared collapse, but because they understood why things held. Children learned the language of tension and load before they could read. Elders taught knot tying as sacred ritual. The songs that once begged the bridge for mercy now celebrated the hands that kept it strong. Faith had not vanished, it had evolved. It was no longer blind obedience. It was trust, in each other, in knowledge, in the balance between fear and understanding. On the 50th day after the collapse, Noah stood on the king's rib once more. The desert wind swept through the fractured ceiling above, scattering golden sand through beams of sunlight. The bridge hummed beneath his boots, low and sure. Siren joined him, her expression soft. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's stable," he corrected. "Same thing." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the steel's song. "Do you still hear it?" she asked quietly. "Always," he said, "but it's different now." "How?" "It's not fear anymore." Siren smiled. "No, it's trust." Below them, the city moved, not as a collection of fearful believers, but as a community of builders, thinkers, and keepers. They were no longer passengers on a dying bridge. They were its caretakers. And in that simple, profound truth, Noah Cade, human, engineer, survivor, finally understood. It was never about being a king. It was never about controlling the bridge. It was about holding. It was about letting go. And most of all, it was about what we choose to hold together. The bridge hummed low and steady beneath him, a heartbeat shared between steel and flesh, between fear and physics, between past and future. It would not last forever. Nothing ever did. But today, and maybe tomorrow, it would hold. And that was enough.